Chapter 1108. However, to everyone's surprise, the netherworld saintess raised her leg and gently nudged his leg, indicating for him to sit a little further in. Yu Qianqiu raised his head in surprise and obediently moved his butt in. As a result, he bumped into Qingniang's butt. The netherworld saintess name caused Qingniang to cooperate and move her butt further out. Finally, there was a small empty space at the end of the shuttle, and the netherworld saintess sat down without any hesitation. What did it mean to be on pins and needles? Yu Qianqiu now had another understanding of the situation. The situation was like this: there were 3 people in the small space, and 2 women were sandwiching a man in the middle. In fact, the 2 women knew him, and he also knew the 2 women. However, he had changed his appearance and wanted to pretend that he didn't know the 2 women. However, the 2 women seemed to recognize him, and he had to pretend that he didn't know them. Thus, the 2 women began to push him left and right. There was also a group of people watching the show with surprised expressions. They thought that he had done something to the 2 women, but in fact, he hadn't done anything to them. Nie Xiaoqian and the others looked at the 3 people in the back with suspicious eyes. They couldn't figure out what the 3 people were doing. Could it be that there was a place with good feng shui behind them? Or could it be that Niu Yud's charm was limitless, and women fell in love at first sight? Even if it was a place with good feng shui, even if Niu Yud's charm was limitless, there was no need to do this in front of everyone, right? Yu Qianqiu straightened his back and sat there motionlessly. At this moment, he couldn't find even the slightest bit of feeling like he was hugging a woman on his left and right. There were still faint sounds of fighting coming from the canyon on the other side of the mountain, but aside from the sound of the wind, it was eerily quiet here. Under everyone's gaze, Yu Qianqiu swallowed with difficulty. Just as he was about to stand up, a hand suddenly reached out from his right and stopped him from getting up. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and saw that the underworld saintess was looking at him with a profound gaze. He immediately confirmed that the other party had recognized him. Hence, his shoulders and waist slumped as he shamelessly sat between the 2 women. Who's afraid of who? After a while, Nie Xiaoqian walked through the crowd and came to the back. She cupped her hands to the saintess of the underworld and asked, "Saintess, are you going to wait here for the underworld emperor?" The netherworld saintess nodded slightly and didn't say anything. Nie Xiaoqian said, "I understand." She looked at her daughter again and didn't know what she was doing. She then turned around and gave the others a look. Everyone turned around and didn't want to watch anymore. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt the pressure on him lessen significantly. He tilted his head to look at the netherworld saintess and transmitted his voice respectfully, "Saintess, what is your intention in doing this?" The saintess of the underworld also tilted her head to look at him and sent him a telepathic message. "Yu Qianqiu, you are so capricious. You were dressed like a barbarian before. I almost didn't recognize you. I almost let you go for nothing." Yu Qianqiu refused to admit his mistake. "Saintess, have you mistaken me for someone else? My name is Niu Yud, not Yu Qianqiu." The underworld saintess blinked her eyes and said, "You can hide it from others, but how can you hide it from me? You should know that I am proficient in divination and can see many things that others can't. How can your little tricks fool my eyes? Do you want me to expose your true colors in front of everyone? Hee hee. No wonder you are the saintess of the underworld. I can't fool you." Yu Qianqiu snorted. He was a little displeased by the other party's belittling and threatening words. It's not a big deal to be proficient in divination. Take me for example. Although I am also proficient in divination, I always keep a low profile and never show it off in front of others. I think it's meaningless to do so. To put it bluntly, it's just vulgar. Oh. From what you said, it seems that you are also proficient in divination. I really can't see it. If there is a chance, I want to see it. The saintess of the underworld's tone was somewhat sarcastic. Yu Qianqiu had set a trap for her to fall into. He expected that she would say this, so he asked, "If you really want to see it, I can show you a few of my skills since there is nothing to do now. I'm just afraid that it will scare you." "Scare me? Not to that extent. I will wait and see." The saintess of the underworld looked around as if she wanted to choose someone for Yu Qianqiu to read their fortune. Unexpectedly, she found that her hand was grabbed by someone. She looked back coldly and saw Yu Qianqiu rubbing one of her hands. He even had a greasy smile on his face, revealing a very wretched look. She had never been treated so disrespectfully before. She immediately said in a cold tone, "Are you courting death?" Qingniang, who had been silently observing the actions of the two, was stunned. From their expressions, she could tell that the two of them seemed to be conversing with each other through voice transmissions. She never would have thought that the fellow beside her would actually do something like profaning the underworld saintess. She could already see the murderous intent in the underworld saintess' eyes, but the fellow was still smiling shamelessly. "Didn't you want to see my divination skills? It's best to use you to verify it. You should know whether or not your divination is accurate. Otherwise, you will say that I am talking nonsense. Why are you looking at me like that? If you don't want to, just say it. However, I will say this in advance. You were the one who went back on your words, not me." Yu Qianqiu spoke righteously, but there was a lewd smile on his face, purposely trying to disgust the other party. He was overjoyed in his heart and sighed inwardly. Dealing with this kind of woman who was used to being high and mighty. If you don't suppress the east wind, her west wind will suppress your east wind. You can't always be nice to her. When it's time to take care of her, you have to take care of her. Don't be fooled by his complacent appearance. In fact, he knew his own capabilities best. If he hadn't gone to the all heavens boundary and learned some secrets, he wouldn't have dared to bully the underworld saintess like this. Even if he was given 100 times more courage, he wouldn't have dared to do so. However, the underworld saintess thought that Yu Qianqiu was deliberately advancing in order to retreat. If she refused now, the other party would naturally take advantage of her. Even if she took care of him, he would still be in the right. Thus, she resisted the urge to slap Yu Qianqiu to death. She clenched her teeth and transmitted her voice, "Is there anyone who divines like you?" Yu Qianqiu grabbed her hand, which was gradually becoming a little tense, and continued to touch her wrist. As he touched it, he laughed shamelessly and said, "To think that you are proficient in the art of divination. There are tens of thousands of techniques that you need to know, and they all return to the origin. Could it be that you don't know that there is a technique in the art of divination called bone feeling? A person's fate is, in fact, predestined in the unseen world. Then, how can it be reflected? It is reflected in a person's bone texture." The saintess was slightly stunned by his words. Although she didn't know how to touch bones, she was, after all, proficient in this field. Not only did Yu Qianqiu's words make sense, but some of them were indeed reasonable in the art of divination. It didn't seem like he was talking nonsense. However, the lewd smile on his face, which was like that of a prostitute, was really unbearable. The most hateful thing was that his so-called bone touching, no matter how she looked at it, seemed like he was molesting a good woman. "After touching for so long, what did you find?" The saintess's tone was so gloomy that ice water could be wrung out of it. She suddenly withdrew her hand and subconsciously looked at the people standing in front of her, afraid that they would see her. Fortunately, everyone was facing forward to show respect to her, the saintess of the underworld. Only the woman at the side was stunned. Little did she know, if everyone was watching, Yu Qianqiu might not have dared to do this. Of course, this guy couldn't be judged by common sense. Perhaps he would dare to do such a despicable thing in front of everyone. In reality, he was thick-skinned and black-hearted. There was nothing he didn't dare to do. Everything depended on the situation. "I only touched for so long, and I only touched one palm. What can I find?" Yu Qianqiu complained weakly. The saintess suddenly looked over and said with a cold and stern voice, "Then, how much longer do you want to touch? Where else do you want to touch? If you can't say anything, believe it or not, I will immediately chop off your hands." What a joke! I will let you see my divine foresight. Yu Qianqiu chuckled in his heart, but his expression turned solemn as he replied, "Since that's the case, then I'll have to embarrass myself. If I've miscalculated in any way, please forgive me." "You want me to forgive you if you are wrong?" The saintess of the underworld was instantly angry. She gnashed her teeth and emphasized word by word, "If you are wrong, I will chop off your dog hands." I will try my best." Yu Qianqiu pretended to touch his chin and rolled his eyes as he pondered. Then, he explained seriously, "From the bone pattern on your palm and your current identity, the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, is the supreme master of the underworld, but he regards you as the saintess of the underworld and will probably listen to everything you say. Therefore, you have a faint air of the overlord of the underworld. If I am not wrong, there should be a word overlord in your name. Am I right?" The saintess of the underworld trembled all over. She looked at Yu Qianqiu in a daze. After a moment of silence, she didn't say whether Yu Qianqiu was right or not. She just gnashed her teeth and said, "Continue to calculate." Yu Qianqiu wasn't in a hurry to force her to give him an answer. Jiang Hu's game was a psychological tactic, so he could take it slowly. He rubbed his chin and began to shake his head and roll his eyes. "From the bone pattern on your palm and my calculation, ordinary experts who are proficient in divination know that the mysteries of heaven can't be revealed. But you are doing the opposite, forcing me to tell you the result of touching the bone. In fact, this already contains a certain principle of fate. You want me to tell you the result of my calculation. What does it mean?" "It means that you want me to announce it to the public. Then, what I am doing to you now can only be summed up in one word, which is announce. It means that I am now revealing the mystery to you. So, there must be a word, announce, in your name. Am I right?" Chapter 1109. Was there a need to ask? Even if he didn't touch her hand and didn't deliberately disgust her, he was sure that he was right. However, the underworld saintess didn't think so. Ever since she walked out of the all-heavens boundary, she hadn't told anyone her name. It had been so long that she had almost forgotten what her name was. It was even more impossible for people outside the all-heavens boundary to know her name. If it was a coincidence that Yu Qianqiu got one word right, then why did he get 2 words right in a row? What convinced her most was that Yu Qianqiu's calculation was reasonable and convincing, and it didn't seem like a blind guess at all. Most importantly, Yu Qianqiu's calculations were correct. Her name really did have the characters Tai and Xian in it. This was definitely not something that could be found through simple guesses and guesses. Although she was proficient in the art of divination, she was frankly shocked, very shocked. She never dreamed that Yu Qianqiu would have this skill. Not only did she look at him in a new light, but she also suddenly felt that this Yu Qianqiu was somewhat unfathomable. Thinking that she couldn't see through his fate, it was naturally not surprising that he had some hidden skills. Therefore, she was even more certain that he was the person she was looking for. How could she know that Yu Qianqiu had mingled with people from all walks of life in his previous life? What kind of tricks had he not seen? It was as easy as a knife-cutting tofu to fool a person with little experience like her. Especially with his eloquence, even a veteran of the Jianghu would inevitably fall for it. Seeing that the other party was shocked by his fortune-telling skill and couldn't speak for a long time, looking at him with extremely complicated emotions, Yu Qianqiu immediately squeezed out an unfathomable smile, but his eyes were maliciously glancing from her face to her chest, wondering which place to touch next. What else? The underworld saintess suppressed her emotions and asked. Yu Qianqiu recovered from his imagination and casually said, "Your name is 3 words. Why do you say that?" Her tone was no longer as harsh as before. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to display the divine quintessence of blind fortune-telling that he learned in his previous life, he realized that something was amiss. His eyeballs immediately drooped down and he said helplessly, "Do you think I'm an idiot? Was there even a need to calculate this? You've already said that there's more. Since there's more, it's naturally 3 words. It seems like there are quite a few people with 4-character names, right?" The netherworld saintess sneered. Yu Qianqiu realized that he couldn't justify himself. He immediately took out his special skill of fortune-telling for the saintess of the underworld and changed the topic. "From the bone texture on your palm and my calculation, your name is 3 words. Am I right?" The underworld saintess was shocked by his words again. She was stunned for a moment and then asked, "Since you said it's 3 words, why don't you calculate the word in the middle?" She was like a dead duck that was asking for trouble. She refused to admit that Yu Qianzhou's calculation was correct. She had no one to blame but herself for being tricked. Earlier, I had only touched it for a short period of time, so I did not manage to get a clear grasp of it. I was only able to calculate out 2 characters. If you let me touch it again, I should be able to calculate it out, Yu Qianzhou said, appearing somewhat troubled. This person. His curiosity mustn't be aroused. Otherwise, if he was seduced halfway, how would he be able to deal with it so easily? The netherworld saintess bit her red lips under her veil. She took the initiative to bring the hand that was touched to Yu Qianzhou. The fingers were slender and the skin was snow-white. They actually trembled slightly. Embarrassed, Yu Qianzhou grabbed them and touched them repeatedly. The netherworld saintess actually took the initiative to let this guy touch her hand? Qingmiang, who was silently observing the two's actions, opened her mouth slightly. Her face was filled with disbelief. She now had 10,000 reasons to believe that this man and woman must have been together for a long time. The so-called blind man naturally had his own way of fortune-telling. Otherwise, how could he make a living? Yu Qianzhou touched her hand, and his heart bloomed with joy. He couldn't help but think back to the time when he found the same blind man to read his fortune for 3 consecutive days. He remembered that the blind man was really blind. He was so eloquent that he almost fooled a veteran in the pugilistic world. Later on, he kept an eye out and changed his identity to find the blind man to read his fortune for 3 consecutive days. In the end, the blind man told 3 different fortunes in 3 days. Furthermore, each time, he felt like he was convinced. He was too good at fooling people. Who would have thought that he wasn't angry? Instead, he was shocked. He directly invited the blind man back with a high salary. He was given good food and drinks, and a few beauties served him. In the end, the blind man didn't disappoint him. He was loyal and devoted. At the crucial moment, he would appear and perform miraculous deeds for him. He became his right-hand man. After he died, Yu Qianzhou didn't know how the blind man was doing. He missed him so much. After touching her hand for a while, he thought that with the previous deceit as a foundation, it was time to let the other party know his abilities. He rolled his eyes and said with certainty, "Uncle, there's one more word that is uncle. Your full name is Taishu Xian." His black eyeballs drooped down as he stared at the other party and asked, "Am I right?" Although he asked, his face was filled with great confidence in his bone-touching divination art. Actually, when she had calculated the first 2 words, she was already mentally prepared. When she heard that her full name was really out, the netherworld saintess was very calm this time. She slowly pulled her hand back and said coldly, "The bull's head doesn't match the horse's mouth. Not a single word is correct. This is not my name at all. Your so-called mastery of divination is only so. Impossible." Yu Qianzhou denied it on the spot, cursing the dead duck's stubbornness in his heart. Then, he used his voice to refute, "My fortune-telling art has never failed before. Forget a name. If it weren't for the fact that you're a woman, would have even divined the names of 8 generations of your ancestors for you. I would have even divined the fate of your past life." The netherworld saintess was stunned. She admitted that she didn't have the ability to calculate the names of other people's 8 generations of ancestors, but she didn't think that Yu Qianzhou was bragging. She just asked with a voice transmission with a puzzled look in her eyes, "What does this have to do with whether I'm a woman or not?" Yu Qianzhou's gaze stopped at her chest. He coldly snorted and said, "If you weren't a woman, I would be able to feel your father's name from your left sternum and your mother's name from your right sternum. If I felt your entire body, you wouldn't be able to hide your fate from me even if you wanted to. You are a woman, and I am a man. How can I touch your body so casually?" The expression under the black veil twitched. She clenched her teeth and remained silent for a long time. Then, she said the word, "shameless." She didn't say anything else, which made Yu Qianzhou's evil intentions fail. Yu Qianzhou was a well-educated man, so he wouldn't force himself to touch her. However, there was a puzzled look on his face. He didn't know why this netherworld saintess wanted to sit next to him. Was it just because she recognized him? The fighting noises in the valley gradually disappeared. Then, there was the sound of a large number of people flying away. The surroundings suddenly fell into a dead silence. A few hours later, 2 beams of light flew over the 2 people's heads at an incredible speed. By the time they realized what was going on, the 2 beams of light had returned. Obviously, they had discovered them. Jin Tai and Bai Qi appeared not far from the flying shuttle. Everyone was overjoyed and bowed. "Greetings, immortal emperor, greetings, emperor of the underworld." Qingyang also stood up and bowed. Only the netherworld saintess and Yu Qianqiu remained motionless. Now that the World Commerce Association of Yu Qianqiu had collapsed and his subordinates had left the immortal realm, he didn't have to worry about being restrained. He didn't care if they were the immortal emperor or the emperor of the underworld. Jin Tai and Bai Qi looked at the 2 motionless people and glanced at each other. Then, they landed on the flying shuttle and politely cupped their hands towards the netherworld saintess. Bai Qi bitterly smiled and said, "I heard from Qianjun that the saintess had secretly left the underworld royal palace a few days before the war broke out. It seems that the saintess had already predicted this calamity." Jin Tai indifferently snorted and said, "So what if she predicted it? Didn't your underworld royal palace still perish?" He was clearly unhappy that the netherworld saintess didn't warn him in advance. The might of the heavens is hard to predict. No one can see the trend of the heavenly Tao. Who can go against the trend of the heavens? They can only go with the flow. If it wasn't for this, why would I be trapped in the mortal world for 100,000 years? The netherworld saintess glanced at the 2 and said, "Under the might of the heavens, I am like a small boat in a raging river. I can't stop anything. It is already not bad that I could reach the shore in the midst of the raging waves." Jin Tai coldly snorted, "If the might of the heavens is hard to predict, then why did the saintess avoid the disaster in advance? If I could predict the movement of the might of the heavens, then I would be the heavenly Tao. I just happened to avoid this disaster because I wanted to find someone. This is fate." The netherworld saintess lightly waved her hand and said, "If I didn't deliberately delay here for a while, I'm afraid the 2 of you would have already encountered Wang Qing." "Humph. There's no point in reasoning with people like you. You." Jin Tai flew into a rage, but Bai Qi quickly blocked him. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting together with the netherworld saintess, he was slightly surprised. He squinted his eyes and asked, "This friend's face is covered with something. It seems like he doesn't want to show his face. I wonder if he is an old acquaintance of Bai Qi." Jin Tai immediately looked over and coldly snorted, "Hiding your head and hiding your tail. One look and I can tell that you are hiding something." The others were slightly shocked as they looked at Yu Qianqiu. They didn't have Jin Tai and Bai Qi's microscopic vision that could see through the human skin mask. Qingyang's expression shook. Her eyes flickered as she stared at Yu Qianqiu. She was more and more convinced of her guess. Deming Luan quickly came out and cupped his hands at Jin Tai. "Immortal Emperor, please calm your anger. This person was sent by an old friend of mine to inform this subordinate. It was precisely because of his timely report that this subordinate was saved from danger." Jin Tai glanced at the others. Seeing Nie Shaoqian nod in agreement, he shouted, "Then let him take off his mask." Yu Qianqiu was just about to take Deming Luan and leave when the netherworld saintess quietly said, "He is my subordinate. I don't think he needs to listen to you, right?" Chapter 11:10. The great Ming Luan, who had received Yu Qianqiu's secret message, also felt that it was inappropriate to stay here for Yu Qianqiu's safety. However, when he heard the underworld saintess's words, he felt that there was still a chance, so he asked Yu Qianqiu to wait for an opportunity. Jin Tai raised his sword-like eyebrows and stared at the underworld saintess with a murderous look. "You shameless bitch. Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you?" Bai Qi frowned slightly. He stood in front of Jin Tai and said sternly, "Jin Tai, what do you want to do? Now is not the time to have internal strife." "You want to have internal strife just because I killed her?" Jin Tai stared at Bai Qi coldly and snorted, Are you going to fall out with me because of her? Bai Qi. So what if you have served this bitch for so many years? So what if I have always been respectful to her? Your underworld royal palace and my immortal palace will collapse just like that. What's the use of keeping this bitch? In one sentence, he revealed the reason why he was respectful to her. I have never expected you to be respectful to others from the bottom of your heart. I am not surprised that you have said this. The underworld saintess slowly stood up and turned to look at the distant night sky. She gave people a feeling of emptiness, and said lightly, if I am not wrong, you should want to go to the immortal world to find someone to help you out of your predicament, Jin Tai. If you dare to touch me, I won't say that you can't find the person you are looking for, but at least I will make you die without a burial place. Just you? Jin Tai snorted disdainfully, but his eyes slightly glanced at Bai Qi. He saw that Bai Qi was looking at the underworld saintess with a surprised expression. It seemed that he did not secretly reveal to the underworld saintess that he was going to the immortal world's ancient forest. Jin Tai was secretly shocked and dispelled the idea of being too presumptuous. The underworld saintess tilted her head and looked at him, and said indifferently, you can try and touch me. Okay. We should be in the same boat at this time. Don't quarrel over such a small matter. It could be said that Bai Qi understood Jin Tai better, so he quickly spoke up to be the peacemaker. Jin Tai just coldly snorted and followed Bai Qi's way down the slope, not mentioning the matter of Yu Qianqiu again. The others remained silent and didn't say anything. Bai Qi glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was still sitting motionlessly. He didn't see any part of him that looked like a subordinate of the underworld saintess. He turned to Nie Shaoqian and said, you drive the flying shuttle to the ancient forest in the immortal world. An ancient forest in the immortal world? Yu Qianqiu, who had been maintaining his vigilance, was startled. He immediately thought of the person that Wei Chuanxiu had mentioned from the underworld saintess words. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, could it be that Bai Qi and Jin Tai are looking for Wei Chuanxiu's grandfather to come out and help? Thinking of this, he immediately had the intention to follow and see what was going on. He was not in a hurry to leave. Nie Shaoqian glanced at Jin Tai. Seeing that her master had no intention of objecting, she immediately said, yes. Taking over Ngao's role, the flying shuttle turned into a stream of light and flew away. No one on the flying shuttle spoke. The netherworld saintess tilted her head to look at Yu Qianqiu, who seemed to be thinking of something, and sat down next to him. It was not convenient for Qingmiang to sit down in front of the immortal emperor, so the man and woman sitting at the back were no longer crowded. Bai Qi turned back to look at the two of them, but didn't say anything. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting next to the netherworld saintess, transmitted his voice and asked, who are they going to the ancient forest in the immortal world to find? He wanted to confirm his guess. I don't know. The netherworld saintess answered very straightforwardly. Yu Qianqiu choked for a while. Didn't you calculate that they are going to the immortal world to find someone to help them get out of their predicament? I only roughly calculated some of their movements. If I can even calculate what they are going to do, or who they are looking for, then doesn't that mean I can control everyone's fate? The netherworld saintess looked at him and asked, could it be that your bone-touching fortune-telling technique is so amazing? Although she refused to openly admit that Yu Qianqiu had the ability to tell fortunes, her words undoubtedly showed that she really believed him. Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment, his gaze landing on her face that was half covered by a black veil. He was very curious about what the face behind the black veil looked like. Blinking his eyes, he shamelessly replied, of course. If you let me carefully touch your face, I'll be able to calculate who you're looking for and what you're doing. In his heart, he added, I've long since calculated that you want to find the devil god for revenge. He was making irresponsible remarks, but the netherworld saintess was frightened by his accurate name. Her eyes flashed as she looked at Bai Qi and Jin Tai, and she changed the topic. Since you are so clever, why do you still ask me? Why don't you just calculate for them and find out who they are looking for? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said in confusion, I say, Taishu Xian, do you think Jin Tai and Bai Qi will let me touch their faces? My name is not Taishu Xian. You are wrong. The netherworld saintess said this and didn't say anything, so Yu Qianzhou's fortune-telling magic was stuck in his mouth and couldn't be used, after crossing the underworld and entering the immortal world, because they had to avoid as many people as possible, and at the same time, they had to hide. So even though Nie Xiaoqian personally drove the flying shuttle at an extremely fast speed, it still took them half a month to finally enter a vast forest, which was their destination. Finally, they arrived at the ancient forest of the Wood Fairy province. Although they were still at the periphery of the ancient forest, they could see towering trees everywhere. The forest was dark, and the sporadic light from the sunlight dotted the surroundings. The old trees and vines were entangled, and the ground was covered with thick rotten leaves. You could hear the rustling sound when you stepped on it. The 11 people quickly looked around, and they all knew that there were countless plant spirits in this ancient forest. Finally, their eyes all focused on Jin Tai. Except for Yu Qianzhou, who could guess most of it, no one else knew who Jin Tai was looking for. Jin Tai. Where is the person you were talking about? Bai Qi asked, floating 1 foot above the ground. His bare feet obviously didn't want to step on the rotten leaves on the ground. He should be in this ancient forest. Jin Tai's eyes flickered as he looked into the depths of the forest. Then he asked Nie Xiaoqian to give him 10 jade talismans. Holding them together in his palm, 10 faint golden light flowed out of his palm and seeped into the 10 jade talismans. He then gently waved his hand and the 10 jade talismans flew in front of the 10 people. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what Jin Tai was doing. One by one, they grabbed the jade talismans in front of them. Bai Qi stretched out 2 slender fingers and held the jade talismans in front of him. He repeatedly checked the jade talismans in front of him and frowned. Jin Tai. What do you mean by this? Jin Tai waved his arm and pointed around, and said arrogantly, everyone split up and search in the ancient forest. If you see an old guy with a wooden staff, he should be the person we are looking for. Immediately crush the communication talisman in your hand to summon me. Nie Xiaoqian and the other immortal palace remnants paused for a moment, but they still saluted in unison, yes, immortal emperor. Bai Qi looked at Jin Tai and his expression twitched a little. He said in a deep voice, Jin Tai. Are you kidding me? You don't even know where the person is and you brought me here? The entire ancient forest is so big. Trying to find a person here aimlessly is like looking for a needle in a haystack. How do you want us to find him? Jin Tai immediately looked at him and said indifferently, do you have a better way? At least it's better than your stupid way. Bai Qi looked around the depths of the forest coldly and said, there are many plants in this ancient forest. As long as you catch a few and ask them, you will naturally find the person you are looking for. Humph. Qin coldly snorted and said, I don't know how many times I've used this clever method of yours, but it's completely useless. Even in the ancient forest, that old fellow's traces are elusive. Even if it's the grass demons that live here all year round, they at most know of the existence of such a person, but no one knows where he is. As soon as these words came out, everyone felt that it was even more difficult to find him. Bai Qi paused and suddenly revealed a ruthless expression, desperate times call for desperate measures. We can't care so much anymore. Set fire to the forest and we will be able to force him out. If he really can help us like you said, even if we make a big commotion and alarm our opponents, we don't have to be afraid. Set fire to the ancient forest? Jin Tai's slender eyes flashed and he said sarcastically, this is a good idea, but I'm afraid that even if we force him out, not only will he not help us, but he will also take both of our lives. Do you think that our current opponents are not strong enough? Hearing this, Bai Qi remembered that the person they were looking for was probably the wood spirit, one of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. Setting fire to the wood spirit's territory might really anger the wood spirit. Seeing that Bai Qi didn't say anything, Jin Tai glanced at the others and said, let's split up and search, we will have a higher chance of finding him. After saying that, he turned into a beam of light and flew into the depths of the forest, seeming to be a bit impatient. The remnants of the immortal palace obeyed and scattered in the dark forest. Before Qin Yang left, she looked at Yu Qianzhou and wanted to say something, but she stopped for a while. She saw that Yu Qianzhou was holding the big bright wheel, and the Emperor of the Underworld and the Saintess of the Underworld were still there. She couldn't say anything, so she turned around and flew into the forest. Who knew that not long after she flew into the forest, her mother, Nie Xiaoqian, flashed to her side. Nie Xiaoqian was obviously worried about her inexperienced daughter risking her life in the ancient forest alone, so the two of them left together. In reality, everyone knew that the wood spirits in the ancient forest weren't just for show. There were many unknown dangers hidden in the depths of the forest. The four scattered commanders also coincidentally met up not far away. It wasn't that they didn't want to obey the immortal emperor's decree, it was just a coincidence. Thus, the four of them split into two groups, and the distance between the two groups wasn't too far. Big bright wheel. My cultivation level is low, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of me. Yu Qianshou grabbed the big bright wheel's sleeve with a smile, and the big bright wheel nodded graciously. Just as the two of them were about to leave together, they heard the Saintess of the Underworld suddenly shout, "Niu Yud. You are my subordinate, so naturally, I will be the one to take care of you." She also flashed over. Bai Qi, who was floating barefoot, looked at the three of them and sneered. He indifferently interjected, "Jean Tai has already left. Do you three still want to put on an act in front of me?" Yu Qianshou. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Chapter 11:11. The three of them looked back at the same time. Yu Qianshou showed a puzzled expression, looking at the underworld saintess, Taishu Xian, and then at the great bright wheel, but not at himself. Of course, it was inconvenient for him to look at himself, as he didn't seem to know who Yu Qianshou was talking about. Bai Qi stared at Yu Qianshou, who was pretending to be ignorant, and said with a faint smile, "Yu Qianshou. Do you really want me to tear off the mask on your face to see you?" The great bright wheel's expression changed slightly, but the underworld saintess, Taishu Xian, remained calm. Yu Qianshou was speechless. With Bai Qi's cultivation, it shouldn't be difficult for him to see that he was wearing a mask, but he didn't believe that Bai Qi could see his face behind the mask. At most, he would be suspicious, and maybe he was trying to trick him. Yu Qianshou pointed at his nose and asked, "Is the Emperor of the Underworld calling me?" "My name is Niu Yud. How could the Emperor of the Underworld mistake me for Yu Qianshou?" He wouldn't give up until he reached the Yellow River. Mistake? Bai Qi snorted, feeling somewhat unhappy, but he still maintained his gentlemanly demeanor, pointing at Yu Qianshou and saying with a smile, "If you were standing in front of me alone, I probably wouldn't think that you were Yu Qianshou. The Great Bright Will has a close relationship with the two Yao cultivators of the World Chamber of Commerce, so he must have a close relationship with you as well. As for the minor immortal cultivator who could be favored by the Saintess, I only heard her mention a fellow called Yu Qianshou, and never heard her mention anyone else. Also, don't forget that we talked face to face in the Endless Cliffs. It's rare to see a minor immortal cultivator who needs my concentration to see their cultivation. It can't be that so many things happen at the same time, right? Yu Qianshou. You can hide it from Lady Jean, but you can't hide it from me. I treated you with sincerity, do you think it's necessary to hide it in front of me?" It turned out that there were so many flaws. It seemed like he had no choice but to admit it. Yu Qianshou let out a bitter smile while rubbing his nose. He bowed to Bai Qi and said, "Emperor of the Underworld, please forgive me. I really had no choice." Yu Qianshou knows his mistake. It's good that you know your mistakes. Bai Qi glanced at the underworld saintess and easily forgave her. He smiled faintly and said, "Naturally, you have your reasons for hiding your true appearance. It has nothing to do with me, so I don't need to pursue it. But I think you don't want to see the Heartless Palace dominate the world, so we should try our best to find the person Jean Tai mentioned." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately dashed into the dense forest. As expected, he did not pursue Yu Qianshou. It seemed like he was trying to be friendly. The remaining three looked at each other in the forest. De Mingluan was not familiar with the underworld saintess, so he did not know what to say. He looked at Yu Qianshou with a questioning gaze. Coo. A few birds landed on the treetops, breaking the silence between the three. Yu Qianqiu glanced around and looked at the underworld saintess with a toothache. He said helplessly, "Saintess, why are you following us instead of the emperor of the underworld? With our cultivation, we won't be able to protect you if we encounter danger." He also wanted to see what kind of person Luer's grandfather was, but he didn't want to bring this saintess along. Although he knew the background of this saintess, he didn't know what kind of person she was. If he got a woman with a venomous heart to stab him in the back, he would simply be finding trouble for himself. The underworld saintess Taishu Xian ignored Yu Qianqiu's words. Instead, she stared at Deming Luan and said, "I have something to say to Yu Qianqiu alone. You should go further away. There doesn't seem to be anything to talk about between us." Yu Qianqiu's words were cut off by Taishu Xian's determined gaze. He scratched his nose and smiled bitterly at Deming Luan. "Wait for me at a place 10 li ahead." Deming Luan nodded, cupped his fists at the underworld saintess, and quickly left. After watching Deming Luan leave, Yu Qianqiu looked at the woman in front of him, scratched his head, and said, "Speak. What do you want from me?" "My original name is Taishu Xian." "You didn't miscalculate." Taishu Xian looked at him and said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment. Looking around, there was no one around him. His eyes quickly turned as a series of thoughts flashed through his mind. Previously, he had been so stubborn, but now he was admitting it so easily. Not knowing what this woman wanted, he denied it immediately. "Saintess, you misunderstand. I was just making it up. Don't take it seriously. You were able to guess my name just by making it up. Then I'll have to ask you to calculate it seriously." Taishu Xian didn't believe it at all. His name was considered rare, so how could it be made up so easily? She raised her hands to the back of her head, and the black sleeves on her arms slid down, revealing a pair of white arms. The black veil that had been covering her face was quietly taken off, revealing an exquisite and peerlessly beautiful face that even an angel would be ashamed of. She had a head full of black hair that cascaded down like a waterfall, and her snow-white skin was as smooth as jade. She was even more beautiful than Ji Wu. Her beauty was so shocking that it could stop the flow of time. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. His gaze was deeply immersed in that peerlessly beautiful face, and he couldn't pull himself away. "Didn't you say that as long as I let you carefully feel the bones of my face, you'll be able to calculate who I'm looking for or what I'm doing?" Taishu Xian's pair of beautiful eyes stared at him. The meaning behind her words was very clear. She was clearly asking Yu Qianqiu to use his bone-touching fortune-telling technique again. In fact, the reason why she was pestering Yu Qianqiu was very simple. Naturally, it wasn't because she was attracted to Yu Qianqiu's masculinity. She understood that with her cultivation talent, she would never be able to match a terrifying existence like the devil god. However, she couldn't find anyone with that ability even after searching everywhere. On the contrary, when she talked about Yu Qianqiu with Bai Qi, she had a hint of understanding. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu and Bai Changchun, whose fate couldn't be seen clearly, were the people she was looking for? Although she couldn't be sure if it was those two people, she decided to start with Yu Qianqiu. Because Bai Changchun wasn't that easy to control, she decided to pester Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yu Qianqiu's bone-touching fortune-telling technique shocked her. Listening to his words and observing his actions, it seemed that he was much stronger than her innate talent. At first, she was a little resistant and didn't want to let Yu Qianqiu touch the secrets in the depths of her heart. However, after thinking about it, she was extremely happy. Since Yu Qianqiu was so good at fortune-telling, he might be able to calculate who could help her take revenge. Therefore, this scene happened. Looking at the beautiful face in front of him, Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He thought to himself, indeed, dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and mice give birth to children that know how to dig holes. No wonder she was the daughter of a Ming, who could attract the devil god and the ancestor of all demons at the same time. The genes that she was born with couldn't be erased. From this, it could be seen how beautiful Ming was in the past. The beauty in front of him made Yu Qianqiu's fingers twitch. He rubbed his hands and smiled awkwardly. Since it's the order of the saintess, how can Yu Qianqiu dare to disobey? What he meant was, then I won't be polite. He pretended to be in a difficult position and strode over to her. Seeing him walking over, Tai Shu Xian's heart was also beating wildly. No man had ever touched her face. She bit her lips slightly and slowly closed her eyes. Yu Qianqiu, who was walking over, stretched out a finger to hook the beautiful jade-like jaw. A smile of success appeared on his face. In his mind, he was already thinking whether he should touch the soft and nice parts of the woman's body next. However, unfortunately, when he moved forward, a ray of sunlight shone through the shade of the trees and directly shone on his eyes. Disappointing. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to avoid the dazzling sunlight. When his finger almost touched the other's chin, he looked at the delicate and beautiful face with closed eyes and suddenly paused. In his mind, Grandma Yan's earnest expectation in the boundary formation of heavens appeared. He had promised Tai Shu Xian that he would tell Tai Shu Xian that Grandma Yan missed her very much. Did he really want to take advantage of her for a moment of pleasure? Yu Qianqiu's outstretched hand slowly dropped down, and the snicker on his face gradually disappeared. Regardless of whether he would offend Tai Shu Xian by doing this, at least he could have a good relationship with Grandma Yan in the boundary formation of heavens. Maybe she could help him in the future. How could he lose the big picture because of a small gain? Looking at Tai Shu Xian, who seemed to notice that something was wrong and was about to open her eyes, Yu Qianqiu took a step back and said with a wry smile, Tai Shu Xian. Grandma Yan misses you very much. Grandma Yan? Tai Shu Xian was very moved. She opened her eyes and said with a pair of beautiful eyes, this is also calculated by you? I don't count for anything. Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, I was just joking with you. I don't really know how to read fortunes. It's just that you haven't gone back to see Grandma Yan for so many years, so I'm just giving you a slight punishment. He first denied that he had taken advantage of Grandma Yan and said honestly, I have entered the boundary formation of heavens and met Grandma Yan. I have heard Grandma Yan talk about you. Impossible. How could you have passed through the boundary formation of heavens? Tai Shu Xian shook his head repeatedly to express his disbelief. Without a choice, Yu Qianqiu could only roughly explain the matter of him meeting Grandma Yan. However, he excluded the matter of finding Bai Changchun and Xinyu being able to enter and exit the boundary formation of heavens at will. After all, he didn't know Tai Shu Xian's character very well, so he didn't dare to reveal anything. Looking at Tai Shu Xian's expression, which showed that he had already believed him, Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, Tai Shu Xian. It's easier said than done to deal with the demonic god. Currently, the immortal realm and the netherworld are already in chaos. Although your cultivation is higher than mine, I'm afraid it's not enough to guarantee your own safety. You'd better go back. Grandma Yan really misses you. Go back. Tai Shu Xian muttered to himself in a daze, if I don't take revenge for my parents, how can I calm down and stay there? I have already conveyed Grandma Yan's words. It's up to you whether you want to go back or not. I can't force you. If you want to go back, just let me know. I will find a way to send you back. Think about it yourself. Yu Qianqiu looked at her, who was in a daze, and shrugged his shoulders. He left her alone and flashed towards the direction where the great bright wheel had left. In the depths of the dense forest 10 miles away, the great bright wheel was really waiting for him. When the two met, the great bright wheel looked behind him and found that he was alone. It couldn't help but ask, you got rid of the netherworld saintess? Chapter 11-12. Ignore her for now. Let's see if we can find the person Jintai mentioned. That person might be an old acquaintance of Wei Chuanxiu's. Yu Qianqiu's gaze searched around, thinking of where to look. Wei Chuanxiu knows him. Deming Luan was a little surprised. He didn't know when Wei Chuanxiu knew such a powerful person. He had never heard of him. He looked around in disbelief. This ancient forest is so vast. Do we really have to search one area at a time? Search one area at a time? Yu Qianqiu shook his head. I'm afraid we won't be able to find that person even if we search the entire ancient forest. I heard Wei Chuanxiu say that the person's residence seems to be in another world. Moreover, the entrance is erratic. It's not like the other two worlds that are fixed in one place after the passage opens. It's very mysterious. So we have to rely on luck to find that person. Otherwise, Jin Tai wouldn't have used such a stupid method to find that person. He suddenly turned his head to look at Deming Luan and smiled. Actually, we're just looking. Do we really have to risk our lives to help Jin Tai? If we run into him, we'll see. If we don't, then forget it. At least on the surface, we can get by with Jin Tai. Don't you think so? He probably didn't realize that without the World Commerce Association's subordinates in the immortal world as restraints, and after witnessing by Chang Chun's methods that were not inferior to the other experts at Jin Tai's wedding, his mentality had gradually changed. Although he didn't mean it, his tone when speaking to Deming Luan was no longer as respectful as when speaking to the commander of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. To be more precise, there was no need to act like a grandson in front of Deming Luan. And the great Bright Will had accompanied him step by step, and he had subconsciously become a little unconcerned. Yu Qianshou's mysterious means of sending Wei Chuanxiu and a large group of people to the Divine Ruin Realm, as well as his relationship with the Underworld Emperor and the Underworld Saintess, had all shocked him. Now he realized that this lad was somewhat unfathomable. Most importantly, Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng had a close relationship with this kid. Adding to the fact that they had risked their lives to save him, Deming Luan's mentality had changed greatly. Once the two of them finished discussing, they headed into the depths of the forest together. Walking from the edge of the ancient forest to the depths of the vast forest, one would find that the distance between the trees was getting thinner and thinner, but the individual trees were getting bigger and bigger. Even a dozen people holding hands would not be able to encircle these trees. Some of these towering trees were even hundreds of feet tall, and some of them had a canopy that could cover a radius of several miles, or even dozens of miles. The trunks of these trees were as sturdy and majestic as a city. It was hard to imagine how many years of snow, rain, wind, and frost they had experienced to grow to such a size. The magnificent trees attracted Yu Qianshou from time to climb up to the crown of the trees. Standing on the branches, he looked around at the undulating green ocean. He realized that the scenery was even more spectacular and shocking than when he was flying in the sky. A gust of wind blew past, bringing with it a refreshing air. Amidst the rippling blue waves in front of him, there were also many beautiful purples and beautiful reds. There were all kinds of trees with leaves that were not green. A flock of white-feathered birds circled above the sea of trees for a while, then landed on the crown of the trees like blooming magnolia. One could even see light apes with their arms spread out, eagle cries circling in the sky, and tiger roars and ape cries below. It was a natural scene that fascinated people. Deming Luan, who was standing on the crown of the tree, looked at Yu Qianshou in confusion. He did not know why he looked so infatuated. Deming Luan had not experienced the destruction of nature in the industrial era of Yu Qianshou's previous life. As an immortal with profound cultivation in this era, he could not understand the worship of nature of the people of that era. In the future, if it is possible, I would like to build a hut in this vast sea of trees and no longer care about the gratitude and grudges of this world. Standing on the crown of the tree, Yu Qianshou waved his hand and pointed at the green ocean in all directions. Deming Luan did not know why he was sighing. Chu Tianji's eyes slightly muttered to himself, where there are people, there are grudges. Once you step in, it is very difficult to leave. You do not want to provoke others, but there will always be people who cannot forget about you. If you want to live in seclusion, you must have enough strength. Otherwise, how can your former enemies let you go? How could he not know this principle? Yu Qianshou casually plucked a leaf from the branch beside him and placed it in his mouth. After chewing for a while, the juice of the leaf was stuck in his mouth and a bitter taste spread on his tongue. After forcefully swallowing it, he could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Just think about that senior Mu that Wei Chuanxiu spoke of. If he did not have profound strength, how could he live in seclusion here for so many years without anyone daring to disturb him? The two of them jumped down from the crown of the tree and continued to search. Along the way, they discovered that on the dark ground covered by the towering trees, this land that never saw the light of day all year round began to reveal a wonder of life that was completely different from the outside world, all kinds of glowing plants. The deeper they went, the more glowing plants there were. Gradually, large groups of glowing plants appeared in their field of vision. Glowing moss, glowing mushrooms, all kinds of ferns and fungus plants displayed a dazzling array of colors. There were also all kinds of vines that were like weeping willows that emitted a natural and gentle glow. Yu Qianqiu marveled at the wonders of nature. He could not help but fall into a group of lavender-like plants that emitted a gentle purple light. This immediately startled the small animals that were lurking in or around it. Butterflies spread their glowing palm-sized wings and fluttered. Beetles with star-like spots of light on their shells hurriedly fluttered their wings and flew away. Just as they landed and climbed onto a tree trunk not far away, they saw a parrot-like bird with blue feathers on its head scuttling out from the branches and leaves of the tree trunk. It quickly hunted the beetles and then chased after the beetles that were flying around. A group of porcupine-like little fellows with a cluster of bluish-white glowing thorns on their backs quickly escaped from under Yu Qianqiu's feet. A fierce female porcupine, in order to protect her cubs, bent the thorns on her back and took the initiative to attack Yu Qianqiu. As a result, she was kicked away by Yu Qianqiu, who did not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. She rolled a few times not far away and quickly ran away with the group of cubs while screaming. A few ghost-like black panthers crawled out of the natural cave formed by the roots of the tree. They stared at Yu Qianqiu with their green eyes and let out a low growl. They seemed to be ready to attack. Yu Qianqiu ignored them. Instead, he raised his head and looked up at the tree. He saw a huge python in a colorful camouflage aiming at the black panthers below. It silently slid down the tree trunk and approached them. The black panthers seemed to have noticed something from Yu Qianqiu's actions. A black panther that seemed to be the leader raised its head and looked up at the tree. It immediately let out a frightened roar to warn the others. Several black panthers quickly fled. When the huge python saw that its prey had escaped, it raised its head and hissed angrily at Yu Qianqiu. It suddenly shot over like an arrow leaving the bow. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. The purple flame high-energy saber that was protecting his side immediately shot out a few streaks. In an instant, the huge python was torn into hundreds of pieces in midair. It fell to the ground in a rain of blood. The gorgeous and enchanting colors were immediately mixed with the smell of blood. It immediately caused the air to throb faintly. It seemed to have triggered something. It immediately made the great Ming Luan, who was standing in the sea of flowers and on the tree trunk not far away, become vigilant. Suddenly, the ground made two soft sounds. Yu Qianqiu felt his legs tighten. He saw two tree roots that were as thick as an arm bursting out from the ground and wrapping around his legs. The roots quickly extended upwards and pierced towards Yu Qianqiu's chest like a sharp spear. Yu Qianqiu quickly grabbed it with both of his hands. He looked around and said, "What evildoer?" Before he could finish his sentence, the ground made a series of popping sounds. Hundreds of tree roots pierced towards him like spears. Yu Qianqiu shouted sternly, "You're courting death." His whole body exploded with a purple light that was condensed from a high temperature. Wherever the purple light flashed, all the plants turned into ashes. The tree roots that had shot out were instantly destroyed. A muffled groan was heard from the forest. The great Ming Luan, who was standing on the tree trunk, stared at a big tree in front of him like an eagle. He waved his sleeves and a dozen bright moon-like light discs quickly shot out. With a series of so-so sounds, the dozens of light discs instantly destroyed the ancient tree in front of him. Audacious human. The remaining half of the big tree let out a strange cry. With a hong sound, it sunk into the ground. The dozens of light discs immediately chased after the deep pit that had appeared on the ground with a so-so sound. With a series of rumbling sounds, the light discs burst out from the ground and burrowed back into the great Ming Luan's sleeves. The originally serene atmosphere in the surroundings immediately became treacherous. It's a tree demon. Its ability to burrow underground is not bad. It runs really fast. The great Ming Luan snorted and looked around. He then frowned and said, "I'm afraid we've gotten into trouble. It's not good to stay here for long. It's better to leave as soon as possible. It's not that we're afraid of them. It's just that there are many plant demons in this ancient forest. It'll be very troublesome to get entangled with them." Just as Yu Qianqiu nodded his head, he heard a rumbling voice coming from all directions. "You want to leave?" Too late. The shadows of the trees in all directions danced in the wind. The surrounding ancient trees suddenly grew and covered the sky. In an instant, they sealed off all directions. The great Ming Luan flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side. Both of them floated in the air. Countless tree roots emerged from the ground. In a short while, all the glowing plants on the ground were annihilated in the churning soil. The tree roots on the ground were entangled tightly. The light in the surroundings immediately disappeared. It was pitch black. The great Ming Luan looked around and snorted coldly, "A group of things that don't know the immensity of the heaven and earth. If you don't move, don't blame me for killing you all." Suddenly, 8 balls of green light flashed out from the dense wall of trees. The sealed space was instantly filled with a dazzling green light. 8 green-robed old men walked out from the green light. Each of them had an angry look on their faces. One of the old men, who was wearing a green leaf crown, stared at the great bright wheel and said indifferently, "So it's an early-stage immortal emperor cultivator, no wonder you dare to boast so shamelessly. Outsiders, even immortal emperors from the immortal world wouldn't dare to be too presumptuous here. How are you compared to immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Our ancient forest and your immortal palace have an agreement not to invade each other. Why are you killing here?" Chapter 11:13. From the looks of it, this person seemed to be the leader of these people. De Ming Luan took a closer look and was slightly shocked. He realized that he could not see through the person's cultivation. He looked at the others and found that their cultivation was similar to his. It seemed that this was going to be troublesome. He immediately sent a telepathic message to Yu Qianqiu about the situation and discussed whether they should fight or run away. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned. He did not expect that he would attract so many experts just by making a move. It seemed that this ancient forest was located within the 3 realms but was independent of the 3 realms. There must be something extraordinary about it. It was obvious that there were more experts in the ancient forest. It would not be good for him to make a big deal out of this. Thinking of this, Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, "You are exaggerating. A giant python ambushed me and I killed it. Then, a tree demon attacked me first. I did not kill it because this is the ancient forest. If I really wanted to start a massacre, do you think it would have a chance to run?" As he spoke, there was a buzzing sound. His entire body was instantly enveloped by purple flames like firewood that had been ignited. An intense heat surged out. The green light that was flickering on the bodies of the 8 people instantly retracted and formed a protective aura on the surface of their bodies, resisting the frightening heat that made their hearts palpitate. All of them looked at Yu Qianqiu in shock and bewilderment. All of them felt a terrifying power that naturally countered each other, causing their hearts to tremble. The pupils of the old man wearing the green leaf crown suddenly shrank and he suddenly cried out, "This is purple fire, purple fire. Purple fire of the true Samadhi fire." The other 7 people also cried out, "Purple fire?" De Ming Luan felt the terrifying temperature around his body. He also looked at Yu Qianqiu in bewilderment. He didn't know how many more secrets this fellow had. The tangled roots on the ground and the surrounding tree walls were visibly shrinking with a squeaking sound. It seemed that they were in great pain. Yu Qianqiu only wanted to show off. He did not want to become enemies with them. He quickly retracted the terrifying heat and the purple fire into his body. He looked at them with a smile, indicating that he really did not have any evil intentions. Once the purple fire disappeared, the 8 of them finally stabilized their trembling souls. At this moment, they realized that they could not see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. The 8 of them looked at each other, and the green light on the surface of their bodies retracted back into their bodies. The entangled tree roots on the ground quickly separated and retracted back into the soil. The surrounding tree walls also quickly retracted, and the ancient trees returned to their original positions. The hazy light began to shine down from the sky again. However, the various kinds of light plants that were buried in the soil could not be restored. The scattered light of the plants could be seen in the soil after the tumble. Of the light of the ground of the earth was much darker than before. I admit that your purple fire can restrain us. However, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. The old man wearing the green leaf crown stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, "Since nothing serious happened, we do not want to make things difficult for you. We hope that you will abide by the agreement between us and the immortal palace. Please leave quickly." Humph. Deming Luan immediately snorted. Previously, they were not so easy to talk to. It was obvious that they were here to punish us. Now that they realized that something was wrong, they immediately became easy to talk to. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him. He knew what that humph meant. However, although the purple fire was powerful, if he used it with his own cultivation, he would not be able to gain the upper hand if he really fought with these experts. The main reason was that the difference between their cultivation was too big. Moreover, he did not want to become enemies with the people in the ancient forest. Leave quickly. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He shook his head and said with a smile, "I am afraid that I will have to disappoint you. This time, I was invited to the Woodkiller Sea as a guest. I have not met Senior Mu yet. How can I leave so easily?" Woodkiller Sea. A few people frowned and muttered. It seemed that it was the first time they had heard of this. As for Senior Mu, there were simply too many people in the ancient forest who could be called Senior Mu. The 8 of them were no exception. It was also the first time that Deming Luan had heard of this place. However, he believed that Yu Qianqiu did not say it casually. There must be a reason for him to say it at this time. As he pondered, he felt that this Yu Qianqiu was a bit mysterious. In fact, Yu Qianqiu didn't know about the Woodkiller Sea. He had only heard Wei Chuanqiu mention it once, so he casually used it. In any case, he never had any psychological burden when he spoke carelessly. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept across the 8 people. From the eyes of the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown, he caught a trace of surprise and uncertainty. He immediately smiled at him and said, "Presumably, you should know about the Woodkiller Sea." The other 7 people's gazes immediately focused on him. They all revealed a questioning look. One of them even asked, "You really know?" The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown hesitated for a while. He muttered, "In the past, when I traveled the entire ancient forest, I vaguely heard people mention that the Woodkiller Sea seemed to be the name of the ancient forest's holy land. The person who said this also heard it but did not dare to confirm it. I did not expect to hear this place mentioned again today. I almost forgot about this name. Damn. Jean Tai was right. Even the old man who lived here for a long time did not know about it." Yu Qianqiu was a little disappointed. However, he heard the 7 people say in unison, "Holy Land?" It seemed like they had never heard of the Woodkiller Sea before. Holy Land? Yu Qianqiu's spirit was lifted. He looked left and right and said with a mouth full of nonsense, "Yes. That's right. The Woodkiller Sea is the holy land of the ancient forest. Do you know where it is?" Everyone's gazes immediately focused on him. Although the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown was somewhat mentally prepared, he still could not help but say in surprise, "The Senior Mu you are talking about is the Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" Yu Qianqiu was immediately filled with joy. Finally, he had a chance to find the place where the wood spirit lived. Although he could not devour it now, he could first find the place and mark it. Who knows, it might be useful in the future. He immediately nodded and said, "Yes. Yes. It is the Senior Mu from your holy land." Although he was not sure, he was most likely right. "You were invited by the Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown asked in disbelief. "Yes. Yes. I was invited by him." Yu Qianqiu nodded sincerely. Demingluan looked at him suspiciously. The old man was not an idiot. After the initial shock, he realized that something was wrong. He also asked suspiciously, since Senior Mu invited you to the Holy Land as a guest, how could you not find the Holy Land? Yu Qianqiu spread his hands without hesitation and said with a bitter smile, Senior Mu's cultivation is profound, and I view him as a god. He said he would let me visit the ancient forest's holy land, the Woodkiller Sea, as a guest. I naturally agreed on the spot, and I was a man of my word. But I did not know that the Holy Land, the Woodkiller Sea, was so hard to find. After searching for a few days, I did not even see Senior Mu's shadow. If you guys know where the Holy Land is, why don't you bring me there? I will reward you handsomely. He said it as if it was the truth. Was he for real? Demingluan suppressed the suspicion in his eyes. He was afraid that others would misunderstand. You have seen Senior Mu from the Holy Land? An old man said enviously. The others were also envious. It was as if meeting Senior Mu was such a lucky thing. The old man wearing a wooden crown was envious, but he shook his head regretfully. Senior Mu is mysterious. There are only legends about him in the ancient forest. The number of people who have seen him can be counted on one's fingers. Even if they have seen him, it is a taboo. Very few people would talk about Senior Mu, so I do not know who has seen him. The gate to the Holy Land is even more elusive. Without a certain amount of luck, it is impossible to enter. Legend has it that if we wood cultivators are lucky enough to enter the Holy Land, we will receive guidance from Senior Mu. It is very beneficial to our cultivation. Unfortunately, we do not have the fortune to go to the Holy Land. The others heard this and had a look of yearning. Only Yu Qianqiu observed their expressions and said with disappointment, so, you guys do not know where the Holy Land is? Indeed, we do not know. The old man wearing a wooden crown shook his head. He suddenly paused and said, but since you were invited by Senior Mu, perhaps you can try your luck at the ancient language tree. Maybe you will encounter the gate to the Holy Land. Ancient language tree? Where is it? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. The old man waved his hand and pointed to the east. In the center of the ancient forest, there is a cliff. Beside the waterfall, there is a towering tree called the ancient language tree. Its leaves are yellow and withered. It is said that it has died for countless years. But it has not died for countless years. It has experienced countless snow, rain, wind, and frost, but its withered leaves have not fallen. It is very magical. The most amazing thing is that whenever the wind blows, you can hear a strange murmur under the tree. It is as if someone is talking. This is also the origin of the name Ancient Language Tree. Unfortunately, very few people can understand what it is saying. It is said that those who can understand it can find the gate to the Holy Land. You guys should go and try. Are there many people in the ancient forest? It must be a gathering of experts. Will it be inconvenient for people from the outside world to go there? Yu Qianqiu asked in detail. He was worried that trespassing into the forbidden area would cause the experts in the ancient forest to gang up on him. The old man paused and immediately understood his concern. He sighed and said, I heard that it used to be lively there. But too many people wasted their time under the ancient language tree, but they could not understand what it said. Almost all of them returned in disappointment. Plus, it is inconvenient for us wood elementalists to leave our bodies for too long. As time goes by, except for some newcomers, no one else will go there. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched, and he cursed in his heart. He felt that the old man's guidance was too unreliable. He didn't even need to guess to know that it was only a legend. If it was useful, then the Wood Demon Sea, which regarded it as a holy land, would probably swarm there every day. Chapter 11:14. The old man seemed to know that this matter was not very reliable and was afraid of making the other party unhappy. He smiled awkwardly and said, I was just saying. Sire, please do as you wish. If there is nothing else, we will take our leave. Take care. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand to stop. He stared at the old man and slowly asked, "The ancient forest is so big. How am I going to find the center?" Deming Luan looked at him speechlessly. It seemed like this guy really wanted to do something useless. The old man was very honest. He waved his hand again and pointed to the east. He said with a serious expression, "Go straight to the east. When you see a cliff with a waterfall and a lonely ancient tree, you will reach the center of the ancient forest. The environment there is very obvious and easy to find. You will see it when you get there." Then he kindly warned, "If Sire really wants to go there, I suggest you go straight to the sky. You can more or less avoid some unnecessary trouble. You must know that not everyone in this ancient forest is kind. That is all I have to say. I will take my leave." The other 7 people also followed him and cupped their hands. The soil on the ground surged like a fountain and swallowed the 8 of them. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. "Did you really receive an invitation to the wood-killing sea?" Deming Luan suddenly turned around and asked. Yu Qianqiu looked around and laughed. He did not answer the question. "Since it is like this, I will just treat it as an eye-opener. Let's go." A figure rushed into the sky and broke through the shade. Deming Luan shook his head and followed closely behind. Looking down from the sky, the ancient forest was still endless. The mountains were undulating and the waves were like the sea. It looked spectacular, but it was unknown how many dangers were hidden within. After flying at high speed for 3 days, the 2 of them who were constantly looking around suddenly slowed down and slowly stopped in the air. In front of the 2 of them was a red cliff. The cliff was exposed and the rocks were red. It was almost barren. It was very conspicuous in this vast ancient forest. A river meandered out of the forest and crossed the cliff. When it reached the end of the cliff, it was covered by the canopy of a towering golden tree. It was as if all the river water had gathered under the tree. The sound of water splashing could be heard faintly. "It should be here." Deming Luan pointed below and said. "Yes. That ancient tree should be the ancient language tree. Let's go. Let's go down and take a look." Yu Qianqiu was the first to go down. He was stunned when he landed under the tree. The Deming Luan who followed was also stunned. There were 2 people who had arrived before them. One was wearing a golden robe while the other was wearing a white robe and was barefoot. The 2 were looking back. These 2 people were none other than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. It was unknown when they had met here, but since Yu Qianqiu and the Great Bright Will could find this place, it was naturally not strange for them to find this place as well. Yu Qianqiu didn't move from his spot, but the Great Bright Will flashed over and greeted the 2. "Greetings, Immortal Emperor, greetings, Underworld King." Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the Deming Luan. He smiled faintly and said, "It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place." He turned to Jin Tai and said, "Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance?" Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the Deming Luan. He smiled faintly and said, "It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place." He turned to Jin Tai and said, "Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance?" Jin Tai turned around and looked at the vast green sea at the foot of the mountain. He pointed to both sides of the cliff and said, "You search from this side, I'll search from that side. We'll flank both sides." He then pointed to the front and signaled to Deming Luan, "All of you search from the middle." This all of you obviously included Yu Qianqiu. Bai Qi looked ahead and was silent for a while. He said slowly, "What if we can't find it?" Jin Tai said resolutely, "Then we will lure Wang Qing and the rest here and then set a few big fires to burn the ancient forest. I want to see how long old man Mu can hide." Bai Qi raised his eyebrows and suddenly looked at him and said, "You mean, to kill with a borrowed knife? Lure Wang Qing and the rest here and then set fire to the ancient forest. Then push the blame to Wang Qing and the rest and let that old man Mu settle the score with them?" "That's what you said, I didn't say that." Jin Tai snorted coldly and turned into a stream of light and shot to the left. Bai Qi sneered and turned to smile at Yu Qianqiu. Then, he also turned into a stream of light and shot to the right. Two rays of light, one gold and one white, flew along the cliff and disappeared into the dense forest in the distance in the blink of an eye. This red bare cliff was like a plain. No one knew how the river that was tens of meters wide was formed. Yu Qianqiu walked along the shore towards the great Ming wheel under the ancient tree. From time to time, fat fish jumped out of the water and fell back into the water. When he reached the edge of the steep cliff, he saw that the river suddenly turned into a crystal waterfall, and the sound of water flowing could be heard. Incomparably thick tree roots climbed up the cliff like countless pythons, and even stubbornly rooted into the red rocks. More than a dozen tree roots drilled out from the mountain wall and the waterfall, extending down the mountain wall along the waterfall. Strong and powerful tree roots could also be seen in the river on the cliff. The exposed roots of the ancient tree occupied an area of several hundred meters on the cliff. In fact, the entire tree was small compared to some of the towering trees in the ancient forest, but it was estimated to be at least 100 meters tall. The trunk would not be able to be encircled by less than 20 people. The branches were bronze in color and spread out in all directions, and were covered with golden leaves the size of a palm. It was like a golden canopy protecting the area. The red cliff was almost barren, there was a clear river, and there was a yellow ancient tree. On the other side of the cliff was a green ancient forest, and there were blue sky and white clouds. The colors were so distinct that it made people feel like they were in an oil painting. Yu Qianqiu had taken out a flying sword at some point in time. He stood on the thick and exposed roots of the tree and forcefully hacked at the ancient tree a few times. Unexpectedly, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. After spending a lot of effort to chop off a piece of rough bark, he turned around and shouted to Deming Luan, "It's really a withered tree, but it's really hard. No wonder it can stand here for so long." After saying that, he directly sat on the thick roots and rested with his back against the big tree. Deming Luan was speechless. He walked towards him and asked, "What do we do now? Do you really want to try your luck here? There's no smoke without fire. With this legend, there must be some truth to it. Since I'm here, I'll just take things as they come. If I don't try, how will I know if it's true or not?" Yu Qianqiu laughed and lay there with his hands on his head. Deming Luan, who was originally worried about the future of the immortal palace after it collapsed, was also infected by his emotions. Thinking that this guy had a backup plan, there was indeed nothing to worry about. After thinking it through, he unloaded the psychological burden and relaxed his body. He walked with large strides to the side of Yu Qianqiu and laid down leisurely like him. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to look at him and smiled, "That's right. Being relaxed is the way of the king. It's so tiring to keep a straight face all day long." Deming Luan was just about to open his mouth to say something when suddenly a gust of wind blew. The golden leaves above swayed, and the whole ancient tree actually let out a faint murmur under the wind. When the wind was strong, the murmur became louder. When the wind was light, it sounded like a gentle lullaby. The two guys lying on the roots immediately widened their eyes and listened attentively, hoping to hear something. However, after listening for a long time, they still couldn't hear anything. The wind stopped, and the sound also stopped. Yu Qianqiu stared at the slightly swaying leaves above him and said, "Did you hear anything? This is clearly the sound of the wind blowing through this tree. It would be strange if I could hear anything." Deming Luan coldly snorted, "It's really just a rumor. Do you really want to continue waiting? Don't jump to conclusions so easily. Why don't we wait for a day and see? If there are no abnormal changes tomorrow, it won't be too late to leave." Just as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, another gust of wind blew, and the ancient tree started to murmur again. The two people's ears perked up again. There were so many winds in the mountain. Every once in a while, they would hear the ancient tree humming a lullaby. This made Yu Qianqiu feel a little drowsy. Suddenly, there was a paw-paw sound in the river. A fish jumped out of the water and fell back. Yu Qianqiu suddenly sat up and wiped his face with both hands. He felt that it was too dangerous to fall asleep in a place like this. When he turned around, Deming Luan had already sat up and was looking at him with a cold smile. It seemed to be saying, "You can even fall asleep here, I really have to give it to you. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and said, I'll go get something to relieve my fatigue. Then, he dashed towards the bottom of the cliff far away. Deming Luan was curious about what this fellow was going to do. After a while, he saw him scurrying back from the bottom of the cliff with a big pile of firewood in his hands. He threw it on the ground and then took out 2 swords and ran to the river bank to look around. Suddenly, 2 water pillars shot out from the water and wrapped around 2 fat carps. They dashed towards the swords in Yu Qianqiu's hands and opened their mouths to swallow the swords in their hands. Yu Qianqiu carried the 2 big carps and ran back to the pile of firewood. He took out a set of barbecue utensils. The firewood on the ground was quickly chopped into pieces and stuffed into the barbecue utensils. With a wave of his hand, a ball of red flame was spat out and the firewood in the barbecue utensils turned into bright red charcoal. The 2 fat carps were still twisting their bodies even though they were dead. They were then grilled over the charcoal. After doing all these, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands excitedly and took out 2 jars of wine. He threw one of them to Deming Luan, who was stunned. He then opened the seal and gulped down a few mouthfuls before putting it aside. He took out some seasoning and brushed it on the dead carps. He was beautiful, but when combined with the environment at this moment and place, he really ruined the scenery. Deming Luan was really speechless. He could only sigh as he leaned against the tree and drank by himself. When the aroma of the barbecue was wafting in the air, he suddenly heard Yu Qianqiu's, eh? Deming Luan turned around and saw Yu Qianqiu standing there curiously and said, This aroma? Don't tell me the barbecue in the ancient forest also has this aroma? He held his sword with both hands and raised it in front of his face. He fanned his nostrils and sniffed the barbecue in his hand. Chapter 11:15. What's wrong? Great Bright Will asked indifferently. He suddenly realized that this fellow's words and actions seemed to be incompatible with this world. Why would the roasted fish have the fragrance from Lu Er's body? It doesn't seem to be from the roasted fish. Yu Qianqiu muttered. His face popped out from behind the 2 big roasted fish and said, Do you smell something? Nonsense. Of course it's the smell of the roasted fish. Great Bright Will said in a bad mood. That's not right. Could it be? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and he immediately looked around. Deming Luan's pupils that were looking at him suddenly shrank. He saw that the place where Yu Qianqiu was standing suddenly had a layer of transparent black ripple light wall. If it wasn't for the clear and crystalline light, it would be almost impossible to notice. And Yu Qianqiu, who was inside it, was looking around like a thief, as if he had stolen 2 grilled fish from someone. Be careful behind you. Great Bright Will cried out in alarm. Yu Qianqiu was shocked when he heard this. He suddenly turned around and his entire body suddenly disappeared. Great Bright Will shot out rapidly and a series of light wheels shot out from his sleeves, shooting towards the wall of light with the force of lightning. However, the exploding light wheels missed. That wall of light seemed to have disappeared at the same time as Yu Qianqiu. The great bright wheel that flashed away searched around the roasted fish. The 10 light wheels that were retracted circled around his body to protect him as if he was facing a great enemy. After that, Great Bright Will flew into the sky and quickly patrolled the surroundings. Unfortunately, he couldn't find a trace of Yu Qianqiu in all directions. When he returned to the side of the barbecue set, the Great Bright Will kicked the barbecue set into the river dozens of meters away with a clang sound. He looked around his surroundings silently, thinking about what had happened just now. Normally, it was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to leave without saying a word. Furthermore, the situation just now. The Great Bright Wheel was suddenly slightly stunned. Could it be that the mysterious rippling light wall just now was the so-called gate of the sacred land? The more he pondered, the more he felt that it was the case. A gust of wind blew by, and the ancient whisperer tree repeated the same ancient voice that it had been murmuring for countless years. Deming Luan looked at the ancient whisperer tree, and after a moment of absent-mindedness, he shook his head and said to himself with a bitter smile, "Is this kid really that lucky? People couldn't find the door to the Holy Land, but he was roasting fish here, and he accidentally entered it? grilled fish? Unless, otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? The great bright will seemed to have thought of something, and hurriedly flashed to the riverside. He picked up the severely deformed barbecue set from the kick, and used his great cultivation to roughly repair it with a th-ka-ka sound. Carrying the barbecue set, he carefully examined the position that Yu Qianqiu had placed it earlier, and restored it to its original position. Then, he tossed the remaining dry firewood on the ground into the barbecue set, and quickly started a fire. This wasn't the end. He also took out 2 flying swords, and with a shwa-shwa sound, he stabbed 2 fat carps into the riverside. After everything was ready, he imitated Yu Qianqiu's previous actions, and also pretended to roast the fish. However, he seemed to be a little absent-minded, and would occasionally look behind him. Speaking of which, when Yu Qianqiu heard the great bright wheel's warning, he abruptly turned around to be on guard. Before he could figure out what was going on, he felt as if he had collided with someone. His head also made a dong sound, as if he had been hit by something with a stick. In the end, before he could even cry out in pain, a soft and pleasant ouch came from the other side. Yu Qianqiu was instantly enraged. He hit someone and still cried out in pain. This was too much of a bully. Yu Qianqiu focused his eyes and saw a green-clothed little girl staggering back from the collision. When he saw who it was, he couldn't help but be stunned. The green-clothed little girl rubbing her nose also froze when she saw who it was. Lu'er? Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. If the little girl in front of him wasn't Lu'er, who he had saved and brought back to the World Merchant Association, then who else could it be? He saw Lu'er carrying a large brown wooden staff. The staff seemed to be made from 2 intertwined tree roots, and the head of the staff was like a large lingji mushroom. It seemed to be very out of place in Lu'er's hands. Yu Qianqiu. Lu'er was also stunned. If the person in front of her wasn't Yu Qianqiu, then who else could it be? It was just that his expression was somewhat fierce, and he was carrying 2 swords in his hands, as if he wanted to eat someone who had offended him. But the strange thing was that there were 2 fragrant dead and deformed fish stuck in the 2 swords. He didn't know what he was doing. Yu Qianqiu's dull gaze suddenly moved left and right, attracted by the surrounding greenery. In the distance, there was a thin mist, and the forest was like splashed ink. The mountains were secluded, and the refreshing air was filled with the fragrance of flowers and plants. It was as quiet as a painting, as if he had fallen into a dream. The little girl carrying an uncoordinated staff in front of him was a bit of a wet blanket. Where is this place? Yu Qianqiu had 2 grilled fish stuck in his hands, and he quickly turned around to look at his surroundings. He realized that in the moment he turned around, the scenery had suddenly changed. Right now, he was standing on a hillside that wasn't considered high. His gaze fell upon an ancient tree behind him, and he was once again dumbfounded. The golden leaves and the bronze trunk were exactly the same as the ancient tree he had seen on the cliff earlier. The only difference was that the ancient language tree from before was entrenched on a red stone cliff, while this one was entrenched on a mountain peak. Looking into the distance, it wasn't quite possible to say that it was the same tree, but it was too similar to say that it wasn't the same tree. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew, and the golden leaves rustled. The familiar murmuring was like a lullaby, reverberating in his ears again. However, the surrounding scenery had completely changed, and there wasn't the slightest similarity. Yu Qianqiu looked at the ancient tree in a daze. Ancient language tree, Yu Qianqiu, how did you come in? Lu'er, who was carrying a large staff, also asked in a daze. Lu'er. What is this place? Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and asked. Lu'er, who was carrying a large staff, was stunned, and said, This is Woodkiller Sea. Woodkiller Sea? Yu Qianqiu's head quickly swayed left and right, and looked around again. He said in disbelief, This is Woodkiller Sea. How is this possible? I was grilling fish just fine, why did I suddenly come to Woodkiller Sea? F***ck. This is too illogical. Could it be this? His gaze stared at the ancient language tree with golden leaves. What is this? Luer, who was already confused, was even more confused. Suddenly, she cried out in shock, "Not good. Not good. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to leave. What's wrong?" Hearing her say it so seriously, even Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Luer carried the brown wooden staff with both hands and activated it with a secret technique. The large staff had immediately brewed a ball of green light. As Luer waved the staff, a beam of green light shot towards the ancient language tree like a laser. The trunk of the ancient language tree immediately rippled with green light, and gradually emitted a black splendor. Humph. A sullen cold snort sounded, and a green-robed old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion suddenly appeared. With a wave of his hand, he cut off the green light that shot out from the head of the huge staff. His palm made a grabbing motion, and the big-headed staff in Luer's hand was immediately sucked over and caught in his hand. Ah! Luer cried out in shock, and quickly flashed behind Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately protected her, and angrily shouted as if he was facing a great enemy, "Who is it? You're already so old, yet you still want to snatch a little girl's things. Don't you have any shame?" The roasted fish on the two swords in his hand still had a lingering fragrance. The green-robed old man looked at him calmly, and the wooden staff in his hand stood upright on the ground. He said indifferently, "So it's you. Luer, come out. He was brought in by you?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. Hearing the meaning behind these words, the other party seemed to know him, but he didn't seem to have any impression of him. Luer, who was behind him, moved half her body out submissively, and one hand grabbed onto the clothes on the back of Yu Qianqiu. She looked at the old man and weakly called out, "Grandpa." Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and struggled free from the small hand that was grabbing onto his clothes. He looked at Luer and said, "He's your grandpa? Isn't the old man selling snacks in hallucinatory Immortal City your grandpa? How many grandpas do you have?" Luer secretly glanced at the old man and said in a low voice, "Of course there's only one grandpa. The one you saw last time was grandpa's transformation." Upon hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was shocked and sized up the old man again. He thought to himself, no wonder even Jean Tai wanted to find him for help. As expected, he was a very capable person. Whether it was tall or short, fat or thin, his spirit was completely different from that old man last time. This wasn't as simple as a disguise, but a transformation. Supernatural power. "So you're Senior Mu." Yu Qianqiu hurriedly bowed and said, "Yu Qianqiu was impolite just now. I didn't know that you were senior, please forgive me." Old man Mu didn't care about him at all. He stared at Luer and shouted again, "He was brought in by you?" Luer pouted aggrievedly and said, "No. I also don't know how he came in, he suddenly appeared." With his understanding of the little girl, old man Mu could tell that she wasn't lying. He then stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, "Speak. How on earth did you come in? If there's a single lie, I'll beat you to death immediately." Yu Qianqiu flashed the grilled fish on the two swords and said with a wry smile, "Whether Senior believes it or not, I don't know how I came in either. I was clearly grilling fish under the ancient language tree in the ancient forest. Who knew that I would turn around and inexplicably appear here? Even if you ask me to explain, I can't explain what's going on either." Grilling fish under the ancient language tree? Old man Mu's tone was filled with disbelief. He turned around and pointed his cane at the ancient language tree. Immediately, a green window appeared on the ancient language tree. Like a TV screen, the scene that Yu Qianqiu had seen on the cliff in the ancient forest appeared. Old man Mu waved his cane and the scene slowly rotated. In the end, it was fixed at an angle. The green window showed the scene of the great bright wheel grilling fish with two swords. That guy didn't mind grilling fish, but he kept looking around vigilantly from time to time. His eyes clearly met with the three people here, but he continued to look around vigilantly as if he hadn't seen anything. Judging from the angle from which the window was looking at the great bright wheel, Yu Qianqiu estimated that the place where the great bright wheel was observing the ancient language tree on the cliff. He didn't expect that the ancient language tree could also monitor the outside world. It was really amazing. Chapter 11:16. Before he could think further, Old Man Mu waved his cane and the green window disappeared. He reluctantly believed that Yu Qianqiu had been roasting fish outside, but this did not mean that he believed everything. He turned around and stared at Yu Qianqiu with his deep eyes. You went to the ancient language tree in the ancient forest to roast fish? If you can't give me a reasonable explanation, although I am not a bloodthirsty person, I will not be lenient to those with ulterior motives. Yu Qianqiu secretly communicated with Utopia, and when he noticed that it was unobstructed, he immediately had the confidence to protect himself. He immediately said bluntly, "To tell you the truth, I came to look for you." "Look for me?" Old Man Mu was slightly stunned and then snorted. "Did that little bat ask you to come?" "Little bat?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned and then realized that he was talking about Wei Chuanqiu. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Senior, you misunderstood me. I didn't want to take the risk here, but I couldn't disobey Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's orders, so I had to bite the bullet and come here. I never thought that I would really meet you, but who knew that I would run into you? Jin Tai asked you to look for me?" Old Man Mu also showed a hint of confusion on his face. "He didn't ask me to come alone. The person who was roasting fish outside just now also asked me to come. There are a total of 11 people, including Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and Emperor of the Netherworld Bai Qi. Everyone is scattered throughout the entire ancient forest to look for you, Senior," Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. "Jin Tai and Bai Qi are here too?" Old Man Mu's eyes turned and he asked with some emotion, "Did something happen outside?" "Something big has happened." Yu Qianqiu sighed. From Jin Tai's wedding, to Bai Changchun's appearance, to the sudden appearance of Wang Qing, the head of the Heartless Palace, to the sudden appearance of a new force and the defeat of the Immortal Palace, to the King of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng's attack on the Dark Imperial Palace, and finally Jin Tai's decision to ask Old Man Mu for help. So they fled here to find Old Man Mu. During this period, he and the Daming will encountered that group of wood demons and learned about the legend of the ancient language tree. Then, he told Yu Qianqiu roughly what had happened. This narration went on for more than an hour. Such a series of ups and downs made the inexperienced Luer's eyes light up. Her face was filled with hope, as if she wished she could be there to experience it. Although the outside world was dangerous, it had a fatal attraction to her. Although Old Man Mu had been suppressing her and wanted her to live an ordinary life, for a person like her who had never experienced the joys and sorrows of the world, how could she settle down if she could not calm down? How could she appreciate the value of ordinary life? Perhaps after she experienced the endless vicissitudes of life and understood that the past was unbearable, she would be willing to live an ordinary life like her grandfather. After a moment of silence, Old Man Mu sighed slightly and said, "It seems that it is time for the immortal realm and the netherworld to change dynasties again." Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Listening to these words, it seemed that the other party would not help Jin Tai turn over a new leaf. In fact, he also wanted this old guy to come out and help Jin Tai. After all, Jin Tai was in power and he still had room to develop slowly, but the Heartless Palace wanted to kill him. Now it seemed that the relationship between Jin Tai and this old guy was not solid. Jin Tai wanted to ask for Senior's help. "Are you going to leave him in the lurch?" Yu Qianqiu asked tentatively. "What do you mean by leave him in the lurch?" Old Man Mu slightly closed his eyes and shook his head, saying, "People don't distinguish between right and wrong. They fight for honor and disgrace. The honored will live in peace, and the disgraced will be mediocre." He asked for everything. "I have seen a lot of changes of dynasties. It is because I don't want to get involved that I live in seclusion here. What does Jin Tai's life and death have to do with me? How can I leave him in the lurch?" As he said this, he opened his eyes and said, "Do you really want to be a lobbyist for Jin Tai? As far as I know, all the sects in the immortal realm have a grudge against the Immortal Palace. As the sect leader of the World Chamber of Commerce, don't tell me that you are willing to submit to Jin Tai." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. The other party had already said this much. He knew that it was useless to say anything else. But then again, he was just trying. If he could help Jean Tai turn over a new leaf, it would be a little good. If Jean Tai couldn't turn over a new leaf, it would be good too. That guy's character was really not flattering. The battle at the Immortal Palace had shown that even the lives of his trusted subordinates were worthless in his eyes. It made people feel too insecure. As the saying goes, when a wall is down, people push it. Yu Qianqiu was also not a good guy. After confirming that Old Man Mu would not help Jean Tai, in order to please Old Man Mu, he made up his mind to simply kill that inhumane pervert Jean Tai. After a moment of hesitation, Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands in obeisance and said, "Senior, after you took Luer from the World Chamber of Commerce last time, Wei Chuanqiu reprimanded me and warned me that I must be respectful when I see you again. So there are some things that I dare not hide from you." Old Man Mu only had a high cultivation and extensive knowledge, but he was not omniscient. When he heard this irrelevant and groundless interjection, he could not help but be startled and said, "What do you want to say?" "It's like this, I inadvertently learned of a conspiracy of Jean Tai. If I can't find Senior for help or Senior is unwilling to help, Jean Tai is going to lure Wang Qing and the others from the Heartless Palace to the ancient forest, and then set the ancient forest on fire to push the blame to Wang Qing and the others. Jean Tai said that if he does this, Senior will definitely not let Wang Qing and the others go." Yu Qianqiu said with a respectful face, looking like he was snitching. "How dare he?" Old Man Mu's long beard and green robe instantly fluttered even though there was no wind. He snorted and said, "Even if you give him 10 guts, he still won't dare." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He could see that this old man thought himself to be an expert and had probably never taken Jean Tai seriously. He did not know Jean Tai's character very well, so water had entered his brain. With Jean Tai's character, he would marry his wife with great fanfare when he was in power, but once he lost power, he would abandon his wife and subordinates and run for his life. Now that he had lost his wife, he did not even mention it. Just imagine, if he was forced into a corner, what else would he not do? However, based on the understanding between the two parties, it was not appropriate for Yu Qianqiu to argue with him. He could only take it one step at a time and nodded repeatedly to flatter him. That's true. Unless Jean Tai is courting death, he would not dare to act recklessly. Old Man Mu indeed did not take Jean Tai seriously and quickly put aside the matter of Jean Tai. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Didn't Little Bat tell you not to see Luer again? Damn it. I have told you so many things, are you going to fall out with me so quickly?" Yu Qianqiu quickly contacted Utopia and made preparations to escape. Then, he cupped his hands and smiled bitterly. "Of course Wei Chuanqiu said that, but I really barged in carelessly. Please forgive me, Senior." Luer was holding his 2 swords that had pierced through the grilled fish and looked at them carefully. Upon hearing this, she quickly nodded at Old Man Mu and said, "Grandpa. He really didn't do it on purpose, just let him go this time." Ouch. Before she could finish speaking, Old Man Mu had already knocked her on the head with his crutch and said angrily, "If you hadn't stolen my crutch to open the gate, how could he have barged in by chance? You are addicted to sneaking away now." It turned out that ever since Luer went out to see the prosperous world outside, her heart had become wild. The days in the wood-killing sea were too boring and not as fun as the colorful world outside. The last time she sneaked out, she was caught by Old Man Mu and locked up for a short while. She couldn't hold it in anymore, so she stole her grandfather's cane to open the Xianmen gate. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would turn around and knock her back when the Xianmen gate was opened? As a result, the Xianmen gate lost the support of Dharma power and closed on the spot, dragging Yu Qianqiu, who had just stepped into the Xianmen gate, in. This matter could be said to be coincidental, but it could also be said to be uncoincidental. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu, even Luer did not know the inside story. Only Old Man Dumu himself knew. The ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea and the ancient language tree in the ancient forest were actually the same tree. It was like something in a mirror that was reflected in the 2 planes. However, it was different from the reflection in the mirror. It was not an illusion but a real object. Whether it was the ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea or the ancient language tree in the ancient forest, the ancient language trees on both sides would disappear at the same time. The ancient language tree was actually the hub that connected the two worlds. The ancient language tree was really ancient. It was the first tree that grew after the celestial realm was established. It could be said to be the ancestor of all trees in the celestial realm. Although it was blessed by nature and lived for a long time, it was unable to develop spiritual intelligence and cultivate immortality. However, it absorbed a considerable amount of the essence of the universe and gave birth to the first wood spirit in the celestial realm. It was the current owner of the wood-killing sea, Old Man Mu Yuanzi. Later, due to the endless disputes between the three realms, Mu Yuanzi couldn't stand the disturbance and wanted to open up a world to live in. However, with his cultivation, he was far from being able to open up a world alone. He had to borrow the magical effect of the ancient language tree, the ancestor of all trees, and use it as a medium to open up a small world. Thus, the wood-killing sea and the celestial realm overlapped. It was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds at the same time. It was very magical. It was also because the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea overlapped that with Mu Yuanzi's current cultivation, as long as there were plants in the two worlds, he could open the profound door at any time and go anywhere in the two worlds. However, Lu didn't have that ability. If she wanted to open the profound door and go between the two worlds, not only did she need the power of Mu Yuanzi's staff, she also needed to find a stable medium, which was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds. Therefore, it wasn't strange that the plants in the ancient forest treated the ancient language tree as the key to entering the wood-killing sea. A long time ago, when Mu Yuanzi's cultivation was still weak, he did often open the profound door here to go between the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea. After a long time, it was inevitable that he would be seen by others. However, with his current cultivation base, there was no longer a need for him to use the ancient language tree. This was also the reason why the plant demons in the ancient forest could no longer find the opportunity to enter the wood massacre sea through the ancient language tree. It was also because of this that this matter could be said to be both coincidental and unfortunate. After Mu Yuanzi listened to Yu Qianqiu's explanation and checked the position of his roasted fish, coupled with Lu Er's actions, he immediately understood. Chapter 11:17. Lu Er, who was reprimanded, threw away the sword with the grilled fish in it. Rubbing her forehead that was hit, she pouted in grievance. The people here all let me play mahjong. No matter how I play, it's always me who makes the wrong tiles. It's too boring. Playing mahjong again. You can't make any progress in your cultivation, only thinking about playing. Mu Yuanzi flew into a rage. His cane mercilessly hit Lu Er's head. The latter held her head and cried out in pain. Playing mahjong? Yu Qianqiu's expression had already collapsed. He looked speechlessly at the grandfather-granddaughter pair. He didn't think that mahjong had already become popular in Mu Monster Sea. Could it be that there were other mahjong friends here? Just as he was lost in his thoughts, Mu Yuanzi's cane was already pointed at him. He scolded, "It's all your fault. If I see you and Lu Er meet again, I'll kill you with one strike." Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. He didn't think that saving someone's granddaughter would turn out to be wrong. It was simply unreasonable. However, the situation was stronger than him. This old man was even more awesome than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. If he couldn't provoke him, he could at least hide. Senior Mu, this junior knows his mistake. That. Yu Qianqiu first admitted his mistake. He looked around and weakly asked, "May I know how this junior should leave this place?" But in his heart, he was thinking, a gentleman's revenge is never too late. Wait until I plant the teleportation landmark and provoke old man by one day. Let's see who is more arrogant then. Lu Er, who was rubbing her forehead, suddenly widened her eyes. Yu Qianqiu. Are you leaving? Her innocent eyes turned to look at her grandfather. They were filled with hope, as if she wanted to beg her grandfather to let Yu Qianqiu stay. Mu Yuanzi turned his head indifferently. He couldn't be bothered to look at her. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a burning gaze and said word by word, "You've cultivated a technique to control the wood attribute?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned when he heard this. The words, "would spell," suddenly flashed through his mind, but he did not practice it at all. He did not know why this old fellow would ask such a question. Amidst the clouds of doubt, a sudden gust of wind blew past. The golden leaves of the ancient language tree began to sway in the wind, and the murmuring of the wind sounded once again. The dreamy and illusory voice seemed to be recounting the endless vicissitudes of life, causing those who heard it to be worried. At the foot of the mountain, the forest was like a layer of mist rising in spirals from splashed ink. The mist came with the wind and blew on the three people on the mountain. Mu Yuanzi and Lu were used to this scene, so they did not feel anything. However, Yu Qianqiu felt a rich and fragrant spiritual energy seeping into his heart. His mind was instantly roused. Just as he was about to praise and flatter Mu Yuanzi, his brain twitched uncontrollably. In an instant, his vision turned black, and images of the starry night sky that he had been dreaming of appeared in his mind. The countless stars that seemed to be in a mess flipped through his mind night after night, and the speed was getting faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, the movements of the stars became traceable. However, this scene in his mind only lasted for a few moments. When the wind blew past and the fog dispersed, Yu Qianqiu woke up from his daze. Although he had woken up, his body trembled in the next moment. He looked somewhat excitedly at the mist that curled up from the ink-like layer of forest that covered the mountains and plains, the Eastern Star Map. It was the Eastern Star Map that had been deeply engraved in his mind. For so long, he had been helpless against it. However, in that instant, it had suddenly been triggered. The pattern was so clear. Could it be that this was the land of great fortune to cultivate the wood's secret art? Yu Qianqiu's heart surged in that instant. He repeatedly repeated the three words, "would killer see," in his heart. The grandfather and grandson both saw his abnormal reaction and followed his gaze down the mountain. They did not find anything out of place. Mu Yuanzi's walking stick suddenly slammed into the ground, causing the entire mountain to shake. He shouted in a low voice, "Are you trying to play the fool and avoid answering?" Yu Qianqiu's figure shook, and he hurriedly cupped his hands and said with a bitter smile, "Senior, you've misunderstood me. I haven't cultivated any wood attribute cultivation technique. On the contrary, Senior's warning just now has enlightened me, and I've gained some comprehension. Perhaps I really can cultivate a wood attribute cultivation technique." "Nonsense." Mu Yuanzi pointed his walking stick at Lu and said, "If you did not cultivate a wood's secret art, how could you have smelled the fragrance on Lu's body? You actually dare to play such a small trick on this old man's head. If not for the fact that you saved Lu, you crafty scoundrel would have already lost your life under this old man's walking stick." Yu Qianqiu was confused by him. He felt that this old man was relying on his high cultivation to be unreasonable. He was both angry and amused as he said, "What does whether I cultivate a wood's secret art or not have to do with being able to smell the fragrance on Lu's body? These are completely unrelated matters. Senior must drag it into this. Aren't you taking advantage of your power to bully others? Taking advantage of your power to bully others? What an ignorant junior. You actually dare to boast shamelessly in front of this old man." Mu Yuanzi's aura changed and directly pressed down on Yu Qianqiu with an unstoppable force. Lu turned pale with fright and stood in front of Yu Qianqiu with a whoosh. She looked at Mu Yuanzi and pleaded, "Grandpa, get out of my way." Mu Yuanzi shouted with an imposing manner. "If I want to kill him, can you stop me?" Yu Qianqiu was already prepared to run away. At this point, he also did not intend to endure it anymore. He immediately shouted angrily, "Old man Mu. Killing someone is just a matter of nodding your head to the ground. If you want to kill me, just say so. There's no need to splash dirty water on me. Damn it. You disrespectful old thing, and you still have the guts to shamelessly teach your granddaughter." It would be strange if you didn't teach her bad things. No wonder Lu always wants to run out. Anyone who sees a shameless old fellow like you will feel disgusted. Ah! Lu exclaimed. This was the first time she heard someone scold her grandfather like this. She hurriedly turned around and waved her hands at him. I didn't. I just want to go out and play. I don't hate grandfather at all. Mu Yuanzi was stunned on the spot. After so many years, this was the first time someone dared to speak to him like this. He was so angry that he laughed instead. No one has ever doubted my character. Good. Today, I will let you die knowing the truth. As he spoke, he waved his big sleeves, and a thick aura spread out. What followed was the same fragrance as Lu's body, but it was even thicker than Lu's. It made one feel refreshed. Yu Qianqiu also couldn't help but take a few more breaths. You smell it, right? Mu Yuanzi looked at Yu Qianqiu's reaction and sneered. Lu and I are the wood spirits of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth. Our bodies are born with a kind of aura that represents life. Ordinary people can't smell it at all. Only those who cultivate wood attribute spells can smell that special fragrance. You still dare to say that you don't cultivate wood attribute spells? You still dare to say that you didn't lie to this old man? So that's how it is. But that wasn't right either. Yu Qianqiu looked at the grandfather-granddaughter duo with a face full of doubt. He scratched his head and said, I do have the possibility of cultivating wood attribute spells, but the key is that I haven't started cultivating yet. Mu Yuanzi snorted coldly and said, Don't think that I don't know what you're up to. As long as a person who cultivates wood attribute spells devours a wood spirit, not only can he possess the innate magical powers of a wood spirit, but he can also transfer the cultivation of a wood spirit to himself. If it weren't for the fact that you accidentally barged in, this old man would have beaten you to death long ago. How could you still be talking nonsense here? When Lu heard that Yu Qianqiu could devour a wood spirit, she was so scared that her face turned pale. She teleported behind Mu Yuanzi and poked her head out to look at Yu Qianqiu timidly. It was as if she had seen Grandmother Wolf. Seeing that this innocent little girl had also misunderstood him, Yu Qianqiu immediately said angrily, Old man Mu. If you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. If this old man really had the ability you say, or the intention you say, I would have made my move when I rescued Lu back to the World Chamber of Commerce. Why would I wait until now to make my move? When Lu heard this, she immediately nodded in agreement. She knew very well that after Yu Qianqiu saved her, he couldn't chase her away no matter what. It was she who stubbornly followed him to the World Chamber of Commerce. Moreover, those sisters in the World Chamber of Commerce were all very good to her. None of them had any ill intentions towards her. Mu Yuanzi was stunned, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was true. In the blink of an eye, his tone softened a little as he said, Maybe you have a bigger plan. Maybe you're deliberately expressing goodwill to Lu, but in reality, you're after my cultivation. When he heard that his tone had softened, Yu Qianqiu immediately took advantage of the situation and became unforgiving. He was so angry that his face turned red, and he stomped his feet exaggeratedly as he scolded, You unreasonable old man, why would I want you? Don't say that this old man can't find you. Even if I find you, so what? With your cultivation, it's a piece of cake for you to deal with me. Don't tell me that this old man is tired of living, so I first ran over to let you kill me, and then conspire against you? What **t logic, who are you trying to fool? When Lu heard this, she immediately nodded repeatedly in agreement. She didn't beat around the bush and stood on the side of whoever she felt was right. She didn't think about her grandfather at all as she walked resolutely to Yu Qianqiu's side, looking a little like she was siding with an outsider. Could it be that there was some other unknown reason why this brat could smell the fragrance on the wood spirit's body? Mu Yuanzi immediately fell silent. He was actually a person who thought highly of himself, and had always prided himself on being an otherworldly expert. Even the domineering demon god knight had to respectfully address him as senior when he saw him. These were all things that he was proud of. Could it be that he had wrongly accused someone? Although he didn't feel good in his heart, and although he also had a temperament that thought highly of himself, to be able to live peacefully in seclusion here meant that he was a person who could take things up and let them go. After a moment of silence, he resolutely said, "I'll let you go this time, but if I find out that you're trying to fool this old man in the future, even if you have to ascend to the heavens or dive into the earth, I'll make sure you die under this old man's staff." As he spoke, he was about to wave his staff to open the profound gate and let Yu Qianqiu leave. "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily and raised his hand to stop him. "Let's talk about the future in the future. There's no need to be polite with an unreasonable person like you. From today onwards, we'll return to our own paths. Let's first clear up the debts that we owe in the past. From now on, we'll go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. Let's pretend we've never met before." "Oh. Could it be that I owe you something?" Mu Yuanzi sneered and stood with his staff on the ground, revealing an expression that didn't know what was good for him. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at Lu. He said with righteous indignation, "Back then, there were a few experts who wanted to molest Lu. It was I who risked my life to save Lu's life, and also protected Lu's innocence. How much is this debt worth? How should this debt be settled?" You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.